November 9th, 2016. It is post-election day, and this is Home Before Dark, episode 91. I am Tim, and as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Mr. Kevin Bradley. Kevin, are you as tired as I am right now?
I'm exhausted, man. It's been a long it was a long night last night, a long day today as a result. I think I'll probably get a good night's sleep tonight knowing that it's all over and done with, at least.
Not just that, but I think we're going to have probably Stone Bowl sitting in our stomach.
Something. I haven't decided yet. I mean, if that's what you want, we can do that
No,
for
I mean, no, because, yeah, probably not tonight. No beef tonight.
sure. Yeah.
We'll go somewhere else. But yeah, it's a little different for us. So we're typically talking pop culture, we're talking occasionally sports, we're talking video games, we're talking movies, TV, nerd
Yeah.
stuff. I'm just to name a few of the things that we talk about. We do get pretty introspective at times, especially at the extended plays that we've done. But this is more of a serious. I don't want to keep it too serious, I guess. Uh,
No.
but just, I mean, it's the most pertinent topic at the moment. It
I
is.
don't know how we can have an episode tonight on a regularly scheduled week, whether it's tonight or tomorrow night or any night this week without talking political. And I think us as a group are probably I can actually talk to you intelligently and
We'll see.
decently
Yeah,
about it. I
understand.
mean, rather than just talking to someone that's going to not let you get a word in edgewise or not let you actually discuss the issues or anything.
Yeah, 100%. And there are people that I respect tremendously that I can't have those conversations with for that reason. There are people that I've grown up with, friends of the family,
Yeah.
things of that nature, probably family even, that I can't talk to. As you said, it would be like talking to a wall that just spits stuff back out rhetorically. So either way, whether
Yeah.
you're on the left, you're the right, you're the middle, whatever, you're in outer space. Anyway,
I think that's the biggest disservice to this whole election cycle is that it's 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving. There's going to be a lot of people having to sit around a dinner table at Thanksgiving, whether you're on the left or the right, and be really uncomfortable as a result.
it should be pretty interesting, even in my home. So, just to give you some background, just my dad's military. My dad's dad was a railroad worker. My mom, um, well, I guess her dad was very highly educated. Went to MIT. He's an engineer. Created some shit. He was an orphan, but anyway, kind of like rags to riches kind of story for my mom's dad, and we grew up with not a lot of money, and my parents raised us. We're very conservative, fiscally speaking, and for the most part, my parents raised me. This is something I think I talked about even in the guilty pleasures episode. When we're talking about the things you're raised, the ideas that you're raised with, the ideas that you're raised to have, the rearing that you have as a child, ultimately shapes I guess your view of the world, whether that's I don't know why I thought that way, or my parents were the only reason I thought that way, or through life experience you kind of have that reaffirmed in you. Either way, it's usually one of two ways. It's whatever. So I was raised in a Republican household, so that was always kind of the leaning of my household, and um, my parents both very much Republican, and in this election, very much just anti-Hillary Clinton. And my sister and my brother, I can never get a really good read on them. They're more about the person's qualities versus any kind of party lines and that kind of thing. So anyway, I guess I was saying all that to say I've pretty much switched completely into being a libertarian over the past. I voted Republican in the past couple elections, which, given this one, it doesn't seem so bad, right? So it'll be interesting. I've already had, I mean, I can have intelligent conversations with my parents about it. There's no like chastising or anything like that, and there's whatever. But It will be interesting. You did bring up a good point about Thanksgiving. I guess I say all that to say this. I think it'll be a little uncomfortable at times at Thanksgiving, but hopefully having the kids around will help. And maybe by then, I mean 2 weeks out, hopefully all the unintelligible, I don't think there's any unintelligible or unintelligent conversation coming from my family, my immediate family anyway, about this stuff, but hopefully that all gets out of people's system by then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's happening. I mean, as the days gone on, I feel completely different than I did this morning. I think the collective what the fuck was really, I mean, what hit everyone, whether you're, I mean, even Trump supporters, I think had a big
Yes,
reaction
absolutely.
that mirrored that for a completely different reason, you know, one being more shock and awe and the other one being elated because they didn't think it was possible. So it's, you know, so I'm a little bit opposite as far as political mindedness, you know, grew up with all intents of single parent. And like you said, I think my upbringing helped define a lot of my political views, but for a different reason. You know, we didn't have a lot of money growing up either, very conservative by all accounts. But my life and my position now is very much a direct result of public and social programs. And it's something that I'm I'm very much for, and I will typically lean left on most issues. However, being from a conservative family in the South, I have more I can still see eye to eye on a lot of Republican ideals, and so I tend to lean left. But I'm also a person that's not going to vote straight ballot typically or ballot, and I'm going to make a decision based on each election and the candidates that are presented, based on the issues that I have at hand that are important to me and how each candidate's going to address those. And unfortunately, this election, I think for a lot of people, you know, you even said it about your parents who are just very much anti-Clinton. I think that was the same can be said about a lot of people that were just anti-Trump. And that's the biggest disservice I think that came out of this election was there was very, very little discussion on the actual issues at hand. At every election, whether it was Hillary or Trump, you know, one versus the other, my opinion was that Hillary talked a little bit more about the issues, but that's just me, and we can dig into that if need be. But you know, both of them, I think, did a lot of trickery and pivoting to avoid talking about any actual issues that were presented sometimes, and that's a disservice to, I think, the public at large. So.
No, I agree with you completely, and it kind of hammers home something that I've been fighting people tooth and nail about over the past few months. So, with that, right, we have, and people will say they have to vote for the lesser of two evils. It's the mindset, right?
Yeah.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
And that sucks so bad to me. And I'll get to the point. There is this very, to me, there's a very bright silver lining to Trump winning this election. That
Oh, I think there's a lot. I want to save that for the end, though. Let's. I
Yeah,
mean,
for
I have a
sure.
lot. I have. I mean, I'm very. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I mean, I was obviously disappointed this morning. However, I have a lot of positive, I think, to take away, and I definitely want to address all that by the end
Yeah.
for sure.
So I'm very transparent. I've been transparent for a while that even given the two gaffes that the man had about Aleppo and getting caught off guard about that stuff, I was very pro Gary Johnson. I was very just pro Libertarian Party and more Bill Weld than anything and the ideals that they represented. And I didn't let anybody sway me from that given the argument that my vote is taking a vote away from their candidate. Because let's take, for instance, I have one of my brother's friends. I don't know if he's going to listen to this, watch this, whatever. He gets into it with me a lot because he's very diehard. He leans very left. And he would tell me that, don't make the same mistakes I made when I voted for Ralph Nader, thinking I was doing a protest vote against the two parties back whenever Bush won the election in 2000. Yeah, it was 2000 because John Kerry was 2004. So he said, only 500 whatever votes it was separated them. Well, there are also 8 million people that were eligible to vote that did not vote. So what this means is that your committee, given that you want to say that there are only two options, okay, if that's the case, then your committee did not select and your constituency did not select a candidate that resonated enough with said constituency to even get them off of their couches. Let's split it down the middle. Let's say there's 4 million non-interacting voters on the Republican side and the Democrat side at that time. You're saying 4 million people, 500 something out of those 4 million people could have gotten up off of their couch to go vote. That's not the third party's fault.
No, absolutely. And I think there's two sides to every vote. I mean, it's the same thing with social programs. I mean, to go back to what I was talking about, there's always the argument of people abusing social programs and abusing their benefits, but there's also a lot of good that comes of those programs, and I'm a direct result of that.
And I will not deny that.
And it's the same thing with people voting for a third-party candidate, whether the Green Party or Libertarian or whatever. There are going to be people that are going to vote for those candidates out of a, what did you call it?
Protest vote.
A protest vote. That's definitely going to be the case. But there are people that genuinely see the benefit of a third-party candidate and the platform that they're on. Unfortunately, I think that Gary Johnson just did himself a disservice, and it may be your silver lining that you're wanting to talk about, but I think we're going to see a lot more prevalence in the third party in the coming election as a result of all this. Unfortunately, Gary Johnson just, at every turn that he got an opportunity to put himself in a public spotlight, to really put him, every time he's on that stage, to project himself as a valid or a valid candidate, it just seemed to backfire on him, and that was really disappointing for me.
That's true, but at the same time, there are the same could be said. I think it's quantity of camera time that really screwed him. And if you want to line up gaffes between Trump, Clinton, and Gary Johnson, the gaffes between the three, to me, are not comparable. And a lot of it has to do with camera time, and I think there's a lot of media suppression of the third-party candidates. Not even just my candidate, but also the constitutionalist candidate, the candidates, Jill Stein, the Veteran Party, whatever you want to say. Any of the independent parties, those people got. I mean, they're suppressed. They're suppressed.
Oh, they absolutely are. They absolutely are.
Even to a point where, I mean, both major party candidates are both suppressed by different networks too, in the same way, but not nearly to the level that the other ones are. But you're right. He did have the gaffe about Aleppo. He did have the gaffe about world leaders. I found a lot of the stuff that he said and did very humanizing in a way. Especially I fucking love the heart attack thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think that was one of the more amazing things that really just got swept. Like, nobody really paid it any attention or anything like that. But that really didn't come up as like a big gaffe or anything like that. But I'm honestly, as the time,
it's because it didn't fit the agenda. I mean, that's
right.
That's
yeah,
honestly,
right.
like you're
right,
saying,
exactly.
it's very limited media time, and if it doesn't fit that agenda of somebody shooting themselves in their foot, for better or worse, that it doesn't fit what they're trying to propose for. Party system.
The Aleppo stuff came about as he was starting to gain some steam.
Exactly.
Right. So he started getting camera time and that kind of stuff. So you're right. He wasn't as polished of a candidate as he could have been. He was not nearly as polished of a candidate as his vice president. And he and his vice president, Bill Weld, admittedly said they don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, but at the same time they have the same core message, whatever. He probably would have been a better candidate put up front. Would him being up there maybe have gotten them 5% of the popular vote, and I don't know, but I say all that to say this. I mean, I particularly am not going to tell you who to vote for, and I don't feel like me being chastised. I don't feel like I should be chastised for voting a third party because maybe your candidate's not going to win. I mean, in my case, let's take my case for example. I historically vote Republican. My vote's not going to take, in the case of my brother's friend who I was arguing with, he was saying I was taking votes away from Hillary Clinton. I'm not, because historically my vote was never going to go to that Democrat Party. So it's flawed logic.
No, it absolutely is. And I think it's a flawed system as well when it comes to third party candidates. And
Yeah.
something that I'm hoping that gets called to light based on this election is that I think it's the one thing that's been brought to my mind as a result of this entire election is just how antiquated some of the systems that we have in place are. Also, there's a lot of that's very valid, and that is what makes our democracy as successful as it's been for the past 200 years. It's this whole thing about popular vote versus electoral college, third party candidates needing to have this arbitrary number of 15% to be able to even be on the stage, so that these things that didn't exist whenever this two-party system was founded in a debate structure and a media conglomerate won't allow them TV airtime or broadcasting time. Like, all of these things are so overburdened by historical precedents when it doesn't really accurately represent the time, culture, or country that we live in as a whole. And I'm hoping that a lot of that stuff is brought to light as a result of this election. I think that's what made Donald Trump so appealing. And I'm beating a dead horse here. Everybody knows that the big reason why Trump was so successful was because of the dissatisfaction by the general public based on the political system that we have in place. And
Yeah, as a whole. And
yeah,
as a whole, it can be seen on both sides, right? That people. Okay, so a couple things I wanted to address. You said you watched Fox a lot last night, right?
I went back and forth, man. Again, it's back to just how I think everybody should really try to do that. There's no secret that Fox News is going to go Republican edge and CNN's going to go Democratic. Like, watch both of them. What are you doing not doing that?
Honestly, I will tell you my logic, and it might sound flawed, but I watched CNN 90% of the night last night because I felt like I lean towards conservatism on a fiscal stance, and I felt like I need to watch the other side just to balance things out. And I was watching I don't know if you saw Van Jones's speech. It's kind of gone viral about his fear of, what do I tell my kids in the morning and all that stuff, and how this was a white lash. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was that bugs me. That bugs me because you're talking about essentially saying that this was a race issue where both candidates were white.
Right.
And you're talking about a populace that shifted from voting. You're talking about a group of people in this majority, in the white majority, that shifted from voting 2 terms for Obama to get him in office to Trump. I mean, you're talking about people who voted for the first black president to be in office and to remain in office. And then they switched their vote due to their dissatisfaction with the Washington machine, whatever you want to say about that. And all of a sudden it's a race issue in that regard. Sure, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There are tons of racist people out there on either side of every gender or every skin color. There are racist people. You can't hide that fact. And there are racist people on either side that are going to vote for either side based off of that. But I don't think that either of those parties, at least I genuinely don't feel that Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump were trying to appeal to their racist constituency. It's a byproduct of what both sides are selling that can appeal to certain people of certain groups. And I don't think that, and that may be just me.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a huge disservice to the people that aren't that way, that voted one way or the other. And I mean, a lot of it is just the way that things unfolded. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Trump had this huge declaration, or he didn't have the declaration, but the media portrayed or brought up this declaration that the KKK had backed Trump. And he's obviously had a lot of really, lack of a better term, racist rhetoric throughout his campaign about different races and different ethnicities and stuff like that. And they're all sound bites. And so automatically people start to draw the line from point A to point B that if people voted for that, then they must also be that. It's like, I'm not, you can't do that. And it's not all black and white. And that's the biggest thing that makes these elections so special is that it's such a broad spectrum of issues that face us as a nation, and there's no candidate that's going to align with your ideals on 100% of those items. And I don't believe that every person that voted for Trump has the exact same ideals that he had. It's not to say that some of them don't, but I don't think that all of the people that voted for Trump back his mentality or his response to the Latin community or the gay community or whatever community you are, Muslim community. I don't think that's the case. Just like I don't think 100% of Clinton supporters support, the events that transpired with the email scandal or what have you. I think
exactly. I don't. You admittedly voted for Hillary Clinton. I don't see you as a warmonger. I don't think that you support endless wars, despite the fact that the candidate that you voted for has perpetuated those things. But you're right. There's no, and again, I honestly feel if you feel like you align with every single principle and every single view that your candidate that you voted for aligns with, I think you're kind of going in blind.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because you're right. I don't think it's a coverall. I think those people are probably not educating themselves enough, and they're kind of blindly following. Like take for example, Libertarian Party. One of the principles is to believe or to go with a commodities-based currency. Not with bartering. I'm not with commodities-based currencies. I think that cool. You want to back something with gold, whatever. That worked for a long time. I mean, if they want to switch back to that, fine. But if you want to start backing currency by different commodities, I think that's an absolutely absurd assertion. I think that's obviously you can't get rid of all government. You can't get rid of any anyway. But you're right. There's no coverall. You have to even if you take the breadth of choices of the third party candidates, you still have to choose between a limited number of people.
Absolutely. Right. And I mean, that's the way it needs to be. I mean,
because these people that are going to be president, no matter the ideologies of them or whatever parties they align with, they need to be the cream of the crop of that party. And I think we saw that
and that's why we have the system in place that we do. And I think that's something that people forget a lot when it comes to these elections is we're not electing a king or a queen. We're not electing a dictator. That's
God, Emperor Trump.
Yeah, that's why we have this system in place. Ultimately, the people that are going to be passing laws and passing things through the House and Senate and Congress, everything in our government branches, they're people just like us. And he's one part of this entire system. And if anything, having somebody like him in there shaking up that balance for people that are going to be going for re-election, I mean, it's not the end all be all. And I'm not going to hold Trump supporters accountable. And that, again, it goes back to what you're saying, people that I've had it the opposite way. I think every supporter of every major political party gets it from another, it's third party candidates get it for being, a protest vote, and Trump supporters are going to get it for being racist and misogynistic, and Hillary supporters are going to get it for being warmongers and supporting people that are career politicians and distrustful and all these other things. The fact of the matter is, you have to have more faith in people. You have to have more faith in our country. That's not, I mean, there's much, much more taking place. And there's a lot more positive that's taking place with these candidates. That is the reason why people are voting for them. And I think that's the thing that people are not even trying to see from the other perspective.
Right, because you said the two words that absolutely encapsulate any election since the introduction of 24-hour news network, and that's soundbite.
Right.
Yeah, and that's all it is. This is a soundbite culture. And I was talking to my parents. Again, my parents are Republicans. They just background information. They didn't vote for him in the primaries or anything like that. So they're also talking about how, the stuff that you see, the sound bites that you see from the Trump rallies are just that. They're picked and chosen from that to be kind of fed into the media machine for ratings. And
Right.
those rallies last for hours. I mean, there's tons of stuff
Yeah.
that he
Yeah.
talks about once he gets calmed down and all that stuff. And um, it's but at the same time, like you said, you have to have faith in humanity. And I have a lot to say about Hillary Clinton, but I will say President Obama was very gracious today. I think
I think all the candidates were. I mean, all the
I mean
speeches.
okay, so with the way that Obama put things, he very much put it in a bipartisan way. Whether you want to believe him, whether you're not, he was saying he's your president, or he's going to be your president. He's your president elect. That's another thing that people are
Yeah.
freaking out, as if he's already been crowned president.
Yeah.
Crowned.
Crowned, exactly.
Yes. That he's got Emperor Trump starting today, and that Obama is not still president until January. And he, as he was saying, he's your president. And he said something that I think was perfect. And I'm just, again, I want to be as transparent as possible when we're talking about this, because I've never really aligned with him fully. I didn't vote for him in either election. I'll say that. But for him to say, we all need to hope he has a successful presidency, I think is kind of powerful, because you're talking about people who voted for him for 2 terms, who are, whether they're Bernie Sanders supporters, whether they're Trump supporters, whether they're Clinton supporters, you're telling them, no matter who you voted for, your president is this man, and
Right.
and he's part of your country. And
Right.
as long as you're part of this country, you better damn well hope that this person brings prosperity to your country.
Right,
And
absolutely.
get rid of party lines. Like, say what you will about the man, let's just hope for the best. Right?
Exactly.
Try to see some sort of silver lining, or some sort of positivity, or be optimistic. I mean, that's the thing about America, right? We're built on opportunity and opportunism, imperialism, whatever you want to say, back then, and the whole American dream is all about optimism and opportunism and all that. On top of Indian burial grounds and bloodbaths and all that stuff. I know, whatever. Anyway, but it's all about seeing. Have faith in humanity at a certain point. Not everybody's scum of the earth. And I personally, in seeing the way that the man has spoken, I think that he had a great speech last night. I think that Trump's acceptance speech, or whatever you want, or his victory speech, was very gracious.
That was the first time that Trump has spoken in the past 2 years where I actually had some sort of sense of calm, despite my better judgment of the implications of things to come, which was the main reason why I didn't vote for him. I completely agree with your
yeah,
point,
and I honestly think that, and his campaign manager even said last night, he had practiced both speeches.
Right.
And she was very transparent about that, believe it or not, whatever. But also, I watched a lot of wrestling growing up. And I've watched a lot of mixed martial arts and prize fighting, and I know a heel when I see one. I know a bad guy who knows how to provoke the crowd and get ratings. And at the end of all of that, it is almost, unless it is John Jones and Rampage Jackson, almost 99 out of 100 times, those 2 men, or women, man and woman, whatever, at the end of it are going to be respectful to one another, and It's all for show.
And that's what last night solidified for me. And I still don't think I would have voted for him, but I wouldn't have had the reaction that I did at the turn of events that took place had he shown some of that along the way. And that was my biggest issue, and why I'm glad that he had the speech that he had, was that, up until last night, that villain portrayal, this person that capitalized on this media monster that we have, and capitalizing on soundbite culture, on social media, on all of the things that made his rise to the presidency so prolific, it was just that. That's all you had to go off of. And until last night, there was none of the other side of that. And so that, I think that was really important. And one of the better things to come out of the past 2 days was seeing the other side of that, like you said, and ultimately why I think the things that Obama said and Hillary Clinton said, everything else is so important. I mean, is that other people need to see that as well. And other people need to realize, we also have to give him credit. It's not like there's somebody that walked out of a gas station that all of a sudden is now the commander in chief of the United States of America. For better or worse, you don't get to that position without A, wanting to succeed, and B, getting some level of success along the way and a certain skill set as a result of that. And I think part of that, your point to watching a lot of WWF, he was in that realm. I mean, he worked with the WWF at one time on a lot of this. I mean, he's very much this person. He is a reality TV star. He knows how these things work. And I think he used that to his advantage. I just wish that it wasn't at the expense of so many people that it shouldn't have been at the expense of, like minorities, like women, so on and so forth. And there are certain things that I think came up that weren't as a result of playing that media coverage. I think that whole Billy Bush thing clearly wasn't intended to be that way. You can put that spin on a lot of the things that he said and done, but that certainly wasn't. And that's one of the things that are cause for concern. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, he very much played that villain role to a T.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that both, I think that the media didn't the media didn't humanize him whatsoever in any sort of regard.
No.
I don't think that they also don't think they very much, to be fair, I don't think they really humanized Hillary Clinton.
No, they did not.
A lot of the way. Unless you're talking about CNN, in which case, like we were talking about the bias of the cable news networks. But at the same time, she was not vilified in the same light that he was along a lot of the stuff. It was, and one of the things, a prime example, I found an article from, I think it was the Washington Post or the Washington Times, Trump rally. I mean, people were talking about his LGBT record, but I saw him at a rally holding up a rainbow flag in Colorado,
right,
with LGBTs for Trump. To my knowledge, I don't know that he's ever said anything about repealing gay marriage or anything like that.
He hasn't. So before we get too much further into this is kind of starting to get into the areas that I wanted to get into. So I think the bulk of this show, what I'd like to do is kind of talk about, let's go through each candidate, and we can start with Trump, which I think is the first odd man out for both of us, and then maybe get your points on Hillary as well. But talk about all three candidates. I have a lot less to say about Gary Johnson. So I think
we really don't need to talk about Gary Johnson. I voted for the man. Limited government, socially accepting. That's really all you need to say. He wasn't a factor. It doesn't appear that we helped, me and the other people who voted Libertarian, help secure a future for them in 2020.
Right.
We'll see what happens. But you're right. It's
it's a disservice too for me to say, I can't speak intelligently to the reasons why I didn't vote for Gary Johnson. Other than the fact that
one main reason I will tell you I voted for him: legalization or decriminalization of marijuana and ending the war on drugs.
No, that would be, but that's my issue, is that, that was the one thing that I did know about him. And I felt like that was a disservice for me to get behind. I didn't, as far as his tax agenda or any of the other financial reform, all of this stuff, I didn't know enough about that candidate, and I couldn't make that decision. What I did have was the two candidates, for better or worse, that were put in front of me and put in front of the American public, which I think is a disservice, which we've already covered. But what I think we should do is maybe talk about Trump and Hillary and sort of what I can talk about why I voted for Hillary, and we can both talk about some of the issues that we saw with both candidates. And I also want to talk about the very real issues that I have with Hillary Clinton. I think that's important. And I think that's what, again, it goes back to what I said before. I don't think a lot of people talk enough about that. It's always a very, I mean, and it brings it to light in a political realm too, where we're all so, you can't help but get self-promoting just because that's what this whole environment gets to be about. And so it's always about the things that we're for, and it's never about the things that we're against. But I think every person voting has to be, you can't vote for someone with 100% confidence. I don't think that system, I mean, it may happen. I think it happened for a lot of people with Obama. It's never going to happen for 100% of the population. And that's why we have the system in place that we do. So talk about the good and the bad for all the candidates. And I think that'd be great. And then we can talk about sort of where things played out and our outlook moving forward, just so we have some sort of outline and umbrella for all this stuff. Otherwise, we very well could talk for 6 hours about it.
Yeah, you're right, completely. So with which one do you want me to start? I guess Trump?
Yeah, let's start Trump. I think that's going to be the biggest one since neither one of us voted for him. We can talk about some of the negatives, and let's save the positives for him until the end, because I think that makes the most sense since we're talking about the positivity moving forward. We can talk about the positivity of him as a candidate and the positivity of the nation as a whole moving forward at the end. But we'll just kind of talk about him as a candidate in general right now.
Okay. So again, to reference two things from wrestling, a face doesn't sell, right? So Mitt Romney, obviously, a face. He's a good guy. He's Mormon, like pristine guy, teetotaler, whatever. He's very family oriented, clean cut guy. Boring, right? Milk toast. And the heel, Donald Trump, which the media is completely at fault for making him the heel, I think, in hindsight. But I honestly, you're right. So there are definitely things that I don't like about the guy, obviously, because I did not vote for him. And some of those things include some of the stuff that he was saying, obviously, the xenophobic stuff that came out, whether that holds sway, whether that was all for media, whatever it was. Anyway, let's take everything that was said at face value, right? So any xenophobic stuff about Muslims as a whole, I think is terrible, right? It's the same way I feel about xenophobic stuff, or what do you want to say, iconoclastic stuff about Christians, right?
Right.
Just it's the same thing. You want to blanket those people together based off of fundamentalists, you're doing a disservice to not only other people's intelligence, but to your own. So that kind of stuff bugs me. Hopefully he'll have a more open mind about that kind of stuff. The wall, not from an immigration standpoint, let's just completely throw that aside. Just from a feasibility standpoint and spending, again, I'm extremely fiscally conservative, and this is, to me, as liberal as it gets in terms of government spending, not in policy but in spending. Talk about how much money it would take. I mean, he says that he's going to make the Mexican government pay for it or reimburse us, but think about the amount of money it takes to build that wall across the entirety of Mexico, or the Mexican border. And not just that, but any rumblings, true or false, about maybe a task force to find illegal immigrants and start the deportation process in that regard. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of taxpayer money. And right now, we don't have enough money to even balance the damn budget coming out of our pockets on top of our spending and on top of our incomes and FICA and all that stuff. So where's that going to come from? I mean, we're going to have to pony up more money. And that's troubling for me. I think those are probably the two main things. I think that.
So to piggyback off of that, I mean, that was to build on that. I think that's a much broader subject for me, for Trump, and I've got a couple of them. But you're talking about spending and where money is going to come from to get these items that he had a quote unquote agenda, however loose based you want to say that, for trade, immigration, ethics reform, like all of these things, healthcare reform. But it was such a loose agenda. Any time he was posed with the question on what policy he was going to instate, or what he was going to, like, literally, what are you going to do to make these things happen, there was never any sort of response or dialogue that actually addressed that concern. And that was a big problem for me, was when you're dealing with a candidate that has a ton of business experience, but B, has zero political experience. And to compound that, you're asked about political issues. You would think that you would take some sort of an approach based on the strength that you have as a candidate to address those issues in a dollars and cents. I mean, that's really what the Republican Party is. I mean, they're based on a lot. I mean, they revolve around a lot of ideals, but that's a big one, is the sort of dollars and cents and conservative spending. He didn't address any of it. He never once addressed what his policies were going to do to pay for certain things, or how, it was all just taken to the most extremes. It's like, immigration's a problem, we're going to build a wall around our entire country. Healthcare is a problem, we're just going to cut everything that's been established, and then we'll just live with the consequences. Like, there was never any actual dialogue or response on how to address those issues. The second side of that is what I touched on before, which is the experience. I think that's the one for me that's sort of a pro and a con for him, is that it's great that he doesn't have a ton of political experience, and that it's a fresh start and it's a new start on the political system as a whole. And hopefully it starts a dialogue and a discussion at a political level on how we can address that with campaign finance reform and everything else that goes with that. But the flip side of that is you have nothing to hold him to. And anytime you try to do that, you have 8 different answers. A prime example is the war on Iraq. He's flip-flopped 8 times on it. Every other real political item, you can't trace it back to one stance. And, even his party, he's running as the Republican candidate or Republican nominee, but he used to be a Democrat. It's this sort of back and forth that leads me to a lot of disbelief in his ability to, and to some, I think that could be seen as a strength, is that he is malleable in that sense, to be able to pass things in the best interest of the country. But that, compounded with his persona, which did not seem to be in the best interest of the country or in the best interest of me ethically, I couldn't get on board with that. Finally, I think the big thing for me was, as a result of both of those things, it's the implications of what his presidency has for the rest of our government as a whole. A Supreme Court justice, control of the Senate. I mean, he's got a lot of things going for him that have really big ramifications that I don't know where he stands on. When asked at the third debate, you have a chance to appoint a Supreme Court justice that could very well overturn Roe v. Wade. How is that your agenda? He just would not answer the question, knowing that is, very well a possibility that could take place. I don't think one justice is going to have that effect, but it's certainly on that course of action that it could be a possibility. And so it has a lot of ramifications for a lot of other things that our country's facing right now. And again, it's this whole broad spectrum that I think our country as a whole is facing a lot of issues, whether it's environmental issues, which again, he never had any sort of stance in anything that he did stand on. It was directly opposed to the things that Obama was trying to incorporate with green energy and stuff like that, which I think is very important and probably should be the most important topic that we have in politics, regardless of party lines, that everybody should get on board with, and yet it's still not. So you've got the environment, you've got the economy, you've got healthcare, you've got national defense. I mean, domestic defense. I mean, it's all of these items, and they're just, for me personally, aside from the upheaval of the system, there was nothing that I could really get behind him as a candidate politically to give him my vote. And that alone wasn't enough. You know, again, that's not to say that I was 100% confident in my vote for Hillary. I think there's a lot of negative, which we'll also get into. But that was the reason why I couldn't do that. And I think, like I said, and it's not to say that there's not positives, which we definitely will talk about. And I know we just said a lot of negatives. But for my vote, I couldn't knowingly cast it for somebody that I was so opposed on so many things. And even when I tried to see eye to eye on or connect with on some level on a particular stance, even that had changed 4 or 5 times throughout the course of the past 15 or 20 years. And which is, again, one of the big detriments to Hillary, is that then you have a career politician who has a 30-year track record, who is held accountable for every decision and everything that she signed into office over the course of her entire career, versus somebody that can just say whatever the hell they want, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's what happens, right? So I don't know if we're moving on to Clinton, but
yeah.
So one of the big things that bugs me is that, right? So Donald Trump as a civil, or as a civilian, all the stuff that he said, and he never passed a single piece of legislation, right? He's never had any sort of implications that we know of into any sort of legislation being passed. Obviously, there's definitely room for backroom deals and lobbying and that sort of thing, but to my knowledge, there's no track record of him influencing any sort of legislation. So you're right. She had to be held accountable for the stuff that she passed as senator, that she championed as first lady. And that's the first thing I wanted to touch on. The reason I couldn't, in good conscience, vote for her, because one of the things that keeps being brought up, and merit or not, that Donald Trump is racist, I personally don't know where that comes from. At least in terms of racism towards the black public. To me, what I can't in good conscience vote for somebody who helped enforce and champion laws that helped to incarcerate in an overwhelming rate young black males with her husband back in the 90s, harsher drug laws, 3 strikes, calling young black men super predators back in the 90s. That stuff you can't run from, especially when that legislation and championing stricter things that have ravaged a community. And as a whole, that's a major part of our country. Those are our brothers and sisters, man. Those are other Americans that are being treated unjustly. And people, I feel, along party lines had turned a blind eye towards that. And I could not do that. That sort of stuff really bugs me. And again, to go back, I've felt for just more background for people who don't know me. I'm a straight edge person. Whatever, take that however you want. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I've never indulged in drugs, alcohol, that sort of thing. And I always used to be very vehemently against legalization of marijuana because I believed a lot of the propaganda, and I felt like, in being a straight edge community, like, I'm not doing it, fuck you, like, you shouldn't do it, and it shouldn't be legal, it's dangerous, that sort of thing. And over the past 10 years, I've realized how stupid I was to feel that way. And honestly, again, the main reason that I voted for Gary Johnson, decriminalization of marijuana leads to ending the war on drugs, at least in that regard, just getting it off the scheduled substance list, hopefully helping commute nonviolent drug offenders' sentences, getting them home, because that, to me, is this cascade effect that helps get these mostly minority and mostly impoverished people out of jail back into their families' lives. And that's, to me, again, in good conscience, I could not vote for somebody who helped champion those things, who, it's just, so there's that. And again, I've used this word. She's ruthless, man. She's a warmonger, and again, with the Washington machine on either side, they're, I mean, it's
So,
militarization, and my dad being military, I'm pro-military, but to the extent of being on the offensive in places we shouldn't be, and constantly being there and droning innocent people, I am not on board with that.
right. And so to that point, I mean, that's an important topic, and it ties into what I was just talking about with Trump, is this idea of being ruthless. And I think it also goes into distrust, which I think is going to be another big one. And I think it's tied, at least for me, directly to both candidates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is Hillary Clinton? So, I mean, that's the thing that you hear from Trump supporters, I feel like, more so than Clinton supporters, but it's very much, I think, an ideal for Clinton supporters, at least for me personally, you know. And I touched on it before about the whole flip-flopping and stuff like that. I mean, Trump supporters, the big thing that you constantly hear, and again, it's just a soundbite thing, is just not being able to trust Hillary Clinton. Well, I couldn't personally trust Donald Trump, not having anything to go off of, and talking about backdoor deals and stuff like that. And there's a lot of that that's been mentioned about Hillary. And, you know, I can't help but just have to have a little bit of faith in our judicial system as well. It's like, it's a slippery slope once you, like, neither candidate has been charged with anything illegal, despite both of them being in legal matters throughout their entire career, whether business or otherwise. So I can't, in good conscience, assume that Hillary is somehow making a backdoor deal to get out of everything, just like Donald Trump has for every law dispute or legal dispute.
Right. You have to levy the same standards of scrutiny against both of them.
Right.
Measure them, and whatever you come up with is your opinion. But yes, yeah, right.
And so, I mean, and it's the same thing about being ruthless. I think Donald Trump is very much to that same degree. You have to be that way in both of their positions. The difference being that, there's not a record for me to go off of for Donald Trump to say with complete certainty one way or the other which way he would react. All I have is this villain that we keep talking about in the election cycle. And how am I supposed to interpret that person being in a UN meeting and discussing going to war with another country or somebody? You know, it's become sort of a joke because it's happened so many times. But, you know, what if some politician in Ukraine tweets him something that he doesn't like, and then he just goes off the handle? You know, I mean, I think it's an overreaction. I certainly don't think that would happen, but I don't know enough about him to trust him in those situations. And he hasn't done anything for me to have that trust or resolve with him. At least with Hillary Clinton, I felt that I had enough trust in her 30 years within that realm to not be so quick to make a decision like that. You know what I mean? And it's sort of unfair to Donald Trump because he hasn't had that opportunity. But I can't blindly go in and vote for somebody that I don't know one way or the other based on all the information I have right now.
Yeah, that's understandable. And you only have the information you're given or that you're able to get. And
right. But to your point, I completely agree about the things that experience thing, again, just comes back to, it's also a pitfall for Hillary. I mean, she has all this experience in the political sector that is going to be held under a microscope, and people can look back on that are a detriment to minorities and to Black youth of America and to the prison industrial system. And I mean, all of these things that she's been a part of for her career, I certainly am not on board with at all. And, you know, it's one of those things that I ultimately just had to swallow, knowing that she at least has the wherewithal to make those decisions now with hindsight that she had then. I don't, and have to hope that it wasn't, that those things weren't necessarily done with the intent of indenturing that populace of our country. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's yeah, I don't know. And I guess the last thing I'll say about is not necessarily so much about her as much as the Democratic National Committee. I it's been said, shame on you guys for rigging the primaries against Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
I don't align with anything the man does fiscally, socially. He's the exact same to me as Gary Johnson, very accepting and be who you want to be. And he's a very genuine and compassionate human being. And it is a shame that he was not given a fair shake, because what we would have seen would truly have been a revolutionary election where two anti-establishment people. Bernie Sanders was an independent. He's been an independent running in Vermont for whatever. He's not a Democrat in the traditional sense, and Donald Trump is not necessarily a Republican in the traditional sense. And those two would have been complete. It would have been interesting, and I honestly feel like Bernie Sanders probably, given the dude, it's crazy to me because we saw. I don't know about you, but again, I don't align with the man. But to see the amount of steam that he was gathering during primary season, I I don't understand how he lost, but I do now because it was rigged against him. But he would have. I honestly feel like he would have given Trump an even fight.
I think had Hillary, I still don't understand the decision for Hillary not to make him her vice president. I don't understand what went into that. I think had that been the case, it'd be a no-brainer, and she would have won in a landslide.
Right, because a lot of what you saw were, and what swung the election, I think.
Oh, absolutely. There's a big protest vote that we talked about before. I mean,
Yeah, it's either the protest abstaining of voting, the abstinence of voting, or voting for Donald Trump out of protest because your candidate was legitimately cheated out of his nomination. And the other thing, again, nobody. It's honestly, and it's a con for this country. Say what you will about anybody's beliefs. We are a country of free speech. We're a country of having free choice and all that stuff. Whatever you want to say about limitations based off of the elite and all that stuff, whatever. We can put that aside. Just ideologically, we are founded as a country of free choice and free speech. And one of the things that's kind of scary, again, say what you will about somebody's beliefs, the people who really decided this election were the people that they said did not exist. Those people that were the silent Trump supporters that they were talking about, the pollsters were all saying this was going to be a landslide victory for Hillary Clinton because the people who were actually coming out and weighing those polls were the people who were vocal enough to say whether or not they supported Trump or Clinton. Well, there were a lot of people that, turns out last night, were too scared to talk to pollsters. Were too scared to say that they supported Donald Trump or were against Hillary Clinton. I'm guessing in fear of ostracization or alienation of their beliefs or being, vilified. And to me, that's scary. In a way that is scary, to be afraid to. You should be able to say you support Hillary Clinton. You should be able to say you support Donald Trump.
But I think it goes back to this whole discussion that we opened up with, man. I mean, this whole conversation is based on this. I mean, that we're in a country now where it's one extreme or the other, and if you don't align with that you're attacked for it without being able to really speak intelligently or completely about the situation at hand.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And guess what? I mean, it's a product of that, right? It's a product. You're surprised what or not you, as a general public, the surprise, even probably among a lot of Trump supporters, majority of Trump supporters, the shock that he won and how fast he won last night.
Yeah.
I mean, it had a lot to do with the fact that people were too scared to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because you talk about it and you're immediately being aligned with the racist populace that
Oh
was
yeah.
also aligned with him.
Or the warmongering part of Hillary Clinton, or the
Yeah,
sort of,
or
or the
social
corruption
programs.
side of Hillary Clinton. You know, things that, again, it's all sound bites and misconceptions. I mean, to that point. So again, I completely agree. There's a certain lack of trust that I had personally with Hillary Clinton, but not without also trying to embrace that lack of trust and acknowledging that part of that distrust is also a result of the time that we live in. And I kind of want to talk about some of that at the end too, which I think this election brought to light more than most, which is that I think a lot of that distrust is a result of the transparency and the resources that we have as a general public now that didn't exist 40 or 50 years ago, that politicians damn sure were also doing that, some of which even got caught doing with Watergate and stuff like that. But I mean, that's always a part of politics. I mean, you have to maintain a certain level of security or discrepancy or distrust, whatever you want to whatever you want to say, for the public best interest. I mean, you can't be completely transparent and have a form of government that everyone knows everything all the time. It's just never going to happen. And I have to kind of give that up. And it's a sad truth, but at the same time, I don't see how people could, it just irks me so much that people can say that about one candidate and not and then expect to have full transparency with a Donald Trump presidency, which is not going to be the case. No. You're talking about a candidate that won't even release his tax information because of that exact reason, you know. So that again, I think that's a big issue. Some of her past record and stuff like that's an issue for sure. But again, there's a lot of positive that I think that she had stances on, or that at least would discuss and talk about, that just did not come from the Trump campaign at all. Healthcare reform, trying to not just do away with Obamacare, but try. I mean, she was the only one of those two that actually said, you know, yes, it's an issue. Yes, premiums are going up, but there's definitely some good here. Let's figure out what we can do to make this work the way it was intended to work, rather than just cut and burn. And here's some of the steps that I'd like to take to get that done. Whereas Donald Trump took the very Donald Trump approach. It did not respond to the issue at hand and just said, get rid of it, you know? So there's that. A lot of the stuff that she wanted to uphold with women's rights and everything that goes along with that. And despite her record with some of the past discrepancies with the minority vote and stuff like that, she was very much on the side of immigration and trying to come up with immigration reform that actually had some sort of immigration policy that worked for everyone involved without it being completely open borders, but also without there being a wall. That was a big thing for me there. Her environmental stance, the whole experience thing that we talked about, I think that can go either way, good or bad. But nonetheless, I think the expression I've sort of come up with is, it's like, if I'm going to have surgery, I don't want to hire a guy from 7-Eleven to do it, you know. and it's not to say, and that's probably not the best analogy, but there's certainly something to be said for somebody that at least knows the process, knows how to handle it. Even more so, somebody that would be coming in without having the freedom that Donald Trump's going to have as a president, with having House and Senate control, as well as appointing a Supreme Court justice. She would have to actually do what we expect presidents to do if something's going to get passed, which is to have bipartisan support and actually go across the aisle to get something done, which I think speaks much more louder to that president or that regime than the alternative, when you've got full backing plus another part of the equation. The other thing to do with that is appointing that Supreme Court justice, which I talked about. I think that's a really, really big issue that people just aren't talking about in general, and that that's something that's going to be far longer than any of our senators or House of Representatives members or the presidency is going to last. Those people are in there for life, and they have wisdom that most of us will never attain, and they have responsibility that no other portion of government really has. And to appoint somebody that isn't going to have those ideals necessarily that I would align with on a more left-leaning justice, that was another big thing for me, knowing that there would be a more left-leaning Supreme Court justice going in. So again, it was all of those, as well as, you know, her global relations, not knowing where Trump was going to fall on that. We've even seen some of that. I mean, that's really evident today more than anything. Is you've seen the Chancellor of Germany come out and say, you know, we hope for the best with Trump. But I mean, people don't know what to expect on a world stage on a political level from Donald Trump's presidency. Whereas I think a lot of people knew, you know, despite Hillary and her flaws, she could at least approach those situations and have an open dialogue without being bullish. And I'm hoping for the best with Trump from that, and hoping that it was just this facade. But ultimately, it was all these factors and not having enough to go off of with Trump that led for me to vote Hillary, despite the flaws that were very evident. So,
yeah. I think one of the things, if Hillary Clinton would have been nominated as president, I think that we would have, and honestly, in my opinion, so it would have been, I say this with a grain of salt. So I don't know if I used that term right. Let's say that I did. So I have never been one to feel like, I feel like voting for somebody based off of their skin color or their gender or sex, sorry, I'm probably offending somebody, is to me just as bad as voting against somebody based off of those same things.
I agree.
I think it would have done wonders for women, for her to be a woman president, right? But at the same time, basing it just off of that, I think would have been a disservice again to you as a voter and to the person. I mean, I think it's honestly it's a little disrespectful to say I voted for her because she's a woman.
Right.
That's,
and there were certainly people that voted for her.
No, absolutely.
And that's the other reason why I think these sorts of conversations are so important, is for people to gain that perspective and to not just be a one-sided voter. I mean, it's the same thing with people that had their third-party vote as just a rebel vote. You know,
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely,
it's the same
100%.
sort of thing.
So I feel like she would have been a placeholder. I feel like she would have maintained status quo for 4 years, which would have been dangerous going along the deficit lines, the way that it's being increased. Don't know what Donald Trump's going to do with that.
Exactly. That's the issue.
We don't know. We don't know, but status quo says through Bush to Obama, and then if it would have been to Clinton, it would have been the same trend towards an extremely ballooning national deficit. And I don't see that would have ever. So either we're going to get that continued with Trump, or it's somehow miraculously going to top off, or decrease or slow down. So I guess maybe that's the thing that would have been a positive. I'm trying to see some sort of positive, because I very much, again, a lot of stuff Bernie Sanders said towards social stuff, I was very big on. Fiscal stuff, he completely lost me, and I would have been able to align with a lot of that stuff and speak positively to that stuff. Hillary Clinton, I can't. I'm grasping at straws. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be as objective and as fair as possible, but because I don't have a lot of positive stuff to say about Trump either. But I guess, I mean, she would have probably, with her party, helped some more in terms of gender equality or something like that. But I'm again grasping at straws. I'm probably sounding like a bumbling idiot, but
so, all right. So we talked a lot about it. I think this election sets a lot of historic precedent for election cycles, and what we know to be American politics in general. A couple of things to note, and we can have a deeper discussion on them. I'll just round them off, and then we can just kind of get into a larger discussion. So one of them we touched on, which is the three-party system, the internet, and campaign finance. What are some of your thoughts on the way this election played out? Things that can most likely be inferred to have an effect on future elections. I think another big one is the minority vote as well, or lack thereof in some cases. What are some of your thoughts?
So one of my main thoughts. So I've been more outspoken recently about this election and in politics in general on social media, mostly on Facebook. I'm finding it hard to interact with Twitter these days, just the way that the timeline is set up. But I posted immediately once the declaration was kind of made at about, pretty much we're saying, why isn't she conceding around 1 or 2 a.m.?
Yeah.
And I said, let me find it, because it was a lot more eloquent than, no, it's not really eloquent. It was just, again, the result was always going to be at least another 4 years of endless spending, unbalanced budgets, militarized police forces, needless wars, droning of innocent people, building enemies abroad, destroying our already non-existent middle class, perpetuating poverty among minorities, over-incarceration of minorities, and non-violent drug offenders, and running our education system into the ground. The positive to Donald Trump winning this election is that, in essence, there should be 4 parties within those 2 now. And you have a lot of pissed off Bernie Sanders supporters who feel themselves as the true progressives, that are in true liberals, that are very pissed off at the Clinton Democrats. And there's a divide there. And there's already has been for the past 18 months a divide in the Republican Party. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's great. I think that holds a lot of great implications for future elections, not in just third parties, but that you're going to see a massive shakeup. Even if we have to keep swallowing the pill of the 2 parties for the time being, you're going to see a massive shakeup in ideologies on both lines, because essentially Hillary Clinton ended up being the Mitt Romney. That's what I keep seeing, is she was the bland, supposed to win candidate that they shoved out, that was supposed to topple the guy that wasn't very. I mean, I don't think Obama's approval rating in 2008 was that great. So, or 2012 was that great. So, I guess it would have been 11, or no, I guess it was 12 at the time. So, yeah. The candidate that they put forth was a safe candidate. The same thing now. It's like, well, we have a villain on this side. We need to stick to somebody that we know, and I don't think we're going to see that much more. I hope. I mean, there's enough anger and infighting to hopefully split those parties apart. And we see at least a higher, if nothing else, we see a higher quality of candidate come from either side. And at best, I think we see creation of new parties. And I think that's great.
I think it's great, but I think that the whole discussion we had about third-party candidates is what is really lacking in American politics right now, is that it's still very much a 2-party system, and that even though you may have those divides within the party themselves, that ultimately it's going to get boiled down to one candidate from each. And I don't know how it needs to take place, but I don't know how it could take place, because it's so ingrained into the way things are set up. But the way that this culture gets its sound, I mean, this whole idea of soundbite culture is really what it boils down to. And people are relying upon those debates and those sound bites and that social media presence to inform their decisions. People aren't doing the due diligence to go and research every little thing about both parties. It's like they hear 1 or 2 things that they like or they don't like, and then they just kind of roll with it without thinking about the full spectrum of what's at hand with that vote. And I don't think that's valid in a 2-party system. And I don't know how you get a third party on there, or even a fourth party, but I think it needs to be done. I mean, this election was more evident of that than ever, that you see people like Bernie Sanders who don't fit into that classification. You have all of these people that are doing protest votes for a third-party candidate without that third-party candidate actually even being able to get on the same stage as the other two to voice their opinion or their concerns about the way things are headed. It's just, I think that way you have, I mean, you're never going to agree 100% with any candidate. And if you do, it's rare, and it's great if you can. But by having 3 or 4 candidates, you're much more likely to align with that 80 or 90 percentile agreement to cast your vote rather than 51 or 52% agreement with what that candidate may be.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I agree with you completely. Again, completely 100% a proponent of multiple parties being added to the ballot. And
so one of the things that I think is going to help that is also the rise of Trump and Bernie Sanders. I mean, not only, I mean, like I said, they're still within their respective parties, but the way that their campaigns were financed as well is going to be completely shaken up after this year.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the other thing, right? I mean, one positive of like his, I don't know that it'll end up getting passed because he's already getting opposition from the Republican parties. One of the great things in his first, like his list of 10 things that he said he wants to do immediately, top of the list is one of the things that I absolutely love. And is one of the things that Gary Johnson and Bill Weld were championing, term limits for Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Trump wants to, that's one of the first things he wants to address. I want to say it was at the top of the list alongside Obamacare, which I won't touch on that. But that to me is also a major shakeup. If you're able to do that, you're potentially eliminating career politicians.
Yeah.
And you're creating a merit-based system based off of 2 elections. Like it's, to me, that's so no matter how you look at it, to me, I think that's so American. I think that goes back to founding father shit. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then like I said, I think the internet is changing things. I think going into, I mean, barring another major outsider like Kanye West 2020 or something like that, I think the internet has officially changed every election moving forward with the introduction of WikiLeaks and organizations like that can bring to light every nook and cranny of every politician that's going to be running for president from here on out. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know yet.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, I think a lot of this stuff is bloat, and I think a lot of it maybe is convoluted, but there's merit in what those people do. And that was one thing that I hated seeing is partisanship, at least the view of partisanship on the behalf of WikiLeaks, because when it was releasing cables about, from the Bush administration, they were heroes, right? They were heroes to the left, and now they're villains. They're Russian spies.
Exactly.
Now that they're unveiling information on their on them. So I think them and hacktivists everywhere, I think, do great work.
I agree.
I think they're conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hat people, and they're people going to be drawing dots. Pizzagate. I don't know if you've looked at that at all.
No.
It's very, if you want to go down a rabbit hole, we could talk about that later at dinner, but because it's a little absurd, but yeah, there is going to be those types of people, but I think that does a disservice to the actual hacktivists that are out there that actually want to bring light to the serious issues. And whatever, if she was cleared on all, I mean, if they want to clear her on charges of criminal charges in relation to the email server and all that stuff, that's neither here nor there. We're talking about the election and the fact that she helped, or she was part of the rigging of the
right. Again, it's all of these things that it's like, I have to have more. I don't doubt that it's happening. I mean, I also don't doubt that Donald Trump has made some backdoor deals with businesses to skirt certain things that may or may not be legal. Like, I don't doubt that, but I have to have I have to let that be outweighed by a certain confidence in the system as a whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all right.
I as a human, I want to see positive.
Right. And so that's a good segue into the last thing we can end on is seeing positive in all of this. And you as a human, I think that's a really great point, and one that I wanted to make up with this whole conclusion is that ultimately we're all people. You know, we separate ourselves and our act of voting from these people that we're voting for, much like we put celebrities on a completely different plane of existence that we're on. They're people just like us, and ultimately people have a conscience and they have ethics and they have other people that they have to answer to, and we have a system in place that is comprised of people and that have systems in place within that to keep the other ones in check. And so I think that it's a prime opportunity to see good happen. And Donald Trump has every opportunity to make that good happen. He has all of the tools and resources available to him in a Republican-controlled House and Senate. I mean, they've got everything that they need to get meaningful things passed through that I think are what make our country so special, is that it's a yin and yang, and it always has been, always will be. And I think that's what I legitimately wanted to go into this election having a conservative candidate that I could get behind. I legitimately wanted that out of this election because I think that's what this country needs after 8 years of a Democratic leader. And it's just, you need one to make a turn and the other one to balance it out. And I think that's what we're going to start to see. And Trump will be at the center of that for better or worse. But I think that there's a lot more good to be said about the other players in place that have been there, have that experience that he's lacking, and everything else to make it all work out and try to right some of the wrongs that very much do exist within systems like Obamacare. There are things that are good about it, but there are a lot of really bads that need to be accounted for. And hopefully there's people there that are willing to do that. I mean, what's his name? Is it Paul Ryan?
Yeah.
Who's the Speaker of the House? Is it him?
Yeah.
Paul Ryan. I mean, he just came out today, which was great. I mean, talking about Obamacare and talking about, he mentioned trying to fix it, not just abandon it, that's the kind of dialogue I want to be having. And what I think was lacking from a lot of this whole campaign cycle is, how do we pivot and adjust versus just slash and burn?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I don't have a whole lot more to add to that. I want to have an open mind, I guess.
I mean, I think I could say a lot of good. I mean, all day today has just been trying to really come to terms with every bit of this election. And I think we all have to do that in some capacity or another. And I know a lot of people are happy and a lot of people are trying to figure out how to be happy. Ultimately, we all have to go in with a faith that it's all for the better. I mean, we're all in this together, and regardless of what we think, the majority, well, I can't say that the majority of people didn't vote him in. He's elected our president now, and at least 50% or 49.9% of people voted him in for that reason. And we're all a collective group of individuals that if that's what the population agrees is in its best interest, then that's what we need to go with. And clearly there's something there, whether we agree with it or not, that needs to be addressed, and that we as a nation need to come together to see that other viewpoint and see that other perspective and allow it to affect us all in a positive light, as well as, I mean, it's not all going to be great. I mean, there's never a politician that has 100% approval rating whenever they come out of office. You know, there's going to be good and bad. But I mean, Donald Trump as a candidate does have a lot of good going for him. I mean, you don't get to the position that he's in by being unsuccessful. I said that earlier, and I think he genuinely wants to be a successful president. You don't go into the presidency with the intent.
He doesn't want to ruin the country.
Exactly. You don't go into the presidency with the intent of tanking the whole thing. I mean, whether all those ideals align with mine or whether we even know what all of them are is a different story entirely. But I think that the intent is there, and sometimes that's what matters most. And so, even though he didn't get my vote, I'm very much on board with having an open mind. I think there's a lot to be said about him as a person in a positive light. And I think that's what we all need to do, is see the positive from all perspectives. And I think that's what's lacking in our political climate, and has been the entire election cycle, is it's all negative. And how can you vote for him or how can you vote for her without actually just being open enough to listen to why,
No, agreed. And one thing we could say is that his winning, at least, has already ended a potential Cold War with Russia.
Right.
I mean, Putin, they already said they want to heal the relations. I mean, for whatever reason, there's probably other reasons. I'm talking to our buddy Rob, he's talking about a pipeline through Turkey and all this stuff and other stuff. But
he obviously has reason. I mean, Russia wants to get rid of some of the sanctions that have been placed on them with everything else.
And if nothing else, we end up not at odds with Russia, and we're probably getting out of Syria in that regard. So, yeah. I mean, there's positives already, but we'll see.
And I mean, to that point, last night, I thought the Dow futures were going to be down 500 points. Looks like the Dow closed on a positive note.
Actually, yeah, it was Dow,
record
S&P,
high, right?
And NASDAQ all went up by 1% at least.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It was, but that's also, in listening to the radio, to quote WSB on the way home, which I don't know any other political stations in Atlanta. I just flipped to that. They were saying that was the only thing that kind of held sway with conventional wisdom, was that with a Republican House and Senate and presidency, typically the markets shift up. So everybody was it was so funny. This guy's falling. This is Brexit. This is our Brexit. Yeah. Like, this is the exact same thing. And like, they're talking about how the pound is still down, and it was 700 points down last night, the Dow, and wake up and it's 1% up. Right. It's like,
well, I think a lot of people are slowly starting to come to this realization that I think we all are. I mean, everybody had that what the fuck moment we talked about, and I think after that kind of settles in, we all realize that we're in this thing together, and that we're all just people, and we all have to have full faith that we're all in this thing together, and that it's going to go on the right direction, just regardless of differing opinions about how it should go,
Yeah.
One last thing before we close. You mentioned GPB, a couple of ballot initiatives that passed in Georgia specifically. I don't know if you looked in on that. The MARTA expansion passed, which is great.
That is awesome.
The school, the state-controlled school referendum did not pass. The tax on fireworks for safety concerns and addressing those issues did pass. The one that perplexes me is the Judicial Review Board did pass, which I'm not for at all, versus the third-party review board. Now it'll be just reviewed by other judges and stuff like that. That is not the way it should be. It's not
very confusing. I imagine
it very much is.
It was a very confusing referendum. That was.
What were the other ballot initiatives in Georgia?
Those were the only ones I remember being on.
Did the strip club tax pass? I don't know if that passed.
That was not on the DeKalb ballot.
It was on mine. I did not, full disclosure, I did not agree with that. I don't believe that should be in place. Basically, they were trying to impose a tax or a fee on strip clubs yearly to help pay for sex trafficking programs.
No, you're right. Yeah, that was on my ballot.
Yeah, so I definitely voted against that. It's a sin tax in the worst kind of way. I don't think that legal strip club operations should be held accountable for sex trafficking operations, which they have nothing to do with, and someone forcing them to pay for something that they've not been associated with. So other than that, I think that was it. Thank you guys for listening to us. Like I said, we're all in this together. We love the hell out of you guys. And I think that's important now more than ever, regardless of who you voted for, why you voted for them. America is what it is because of those opinions. And we're glad to have you guys here to just listen to ours, however misinformed or unintelligent they may seem at times. So thanks for checking us out. You can find us both on Twitter. Tim, where can they find you at?
Tim Herb.
Find me as well at The Architect. That's at _ARC, number 1 TECT. Collectively at Home Before Dark. That's home with Home Before Dark, before spelled B and then number 4. Sorry. Thanks again, guys. As always, be home before dark.